Wow. A show like this I don't think any of you have any notion of how much hard work, time, and effort it takes on the part of so many people. The performers, you don't know about the stage staff, you don't know about the producer, Kurt Peterson, who's been working on it for 3 months. And especially Paul Gemignani. And I know I'll forget other people, but 2 in particular. My good friend Bert Shoveloff. Without whom this show would not be here. And above all, to Hal Prince, without whom I would not be here.
Wow is right. This is where I sat with Stephen for almost the entire evening, an accidental evening, a legendary evening that almost didn't happen. It began with a phone call. Joyce Worsley, administrator of the American Musical and Dramatic Academy, my alma mater, having heard I was raising money for Angela's Gypsy in London, called to ask if I would put together a small gathering to honor Hal Prince. I thought, what a great idea. I called Hal, and Hal said no. He didn't say why. I then suggested we ask Steve. So in the autumn of 1972, I phoned Steve and said the school was in trouble and would he show up at a dinner at the plaza, listen to a couple of AMDA students, say thanks, and go home. Well, Steve said yes. The rest is history, and I'd like to share some of it with you, this accidental legend. I'm a bit hazy with the details after 50 years. There are some things I remember vaguely, and others with a lot of certainty. So much happened between that first phone call and our first meeting with Steve. A lot. I asked Craig Zaden, an upcoming writer who was doing research for his book Sondheim and Company, to work with me. His partner Neil Applebaum would assist. I knew we were planning on going to the plaza, but something told me to ask Hal Prince if we could use the Shubert Theatre. He said yes. Then the ever-ambitious Craig spoke with Warner Brothers, who were publishing his book, and he soon informed me that we had a recording contract with Warner Brothers Records. He also got Gifford and Wallace, the premier New York PR firm, to donate press for the event for a tax write-off. Neil Applebaum began work on the now famous Scrabble poster. Now, this was pre-computers, and I remember Neil showing it to me on the floor with all the pasted-on Scrabble cutouts in complete disarray. Gifford and Wallace thought the poster, which was also used for the New York Times ad, was a disaster. The show sold out in a week, and the poster and the album cover became iconic. I was surprised when Craig began work on a script for the evening, a murder mystery party musical. The plot thickens. Charlotte Moore, who is now the artistic director of the Irish Rep, offered to help us. She was a godsend and sat in front of my rented IBM typewriter in Vicki Mallory's small apartment for the 3 months we worked on the show. An unsung heroine. And thanks, Vicki, for your pad. We began reaching out to performers, but as my anxiety grew, I thought it might be a good idea to meet with Steve, to fill him in on our rapidly expanding evening before he heard it from someone else. So after my quick prayer, we entered his townhouse on East 49th and met with Steve.
My jaw fell open, and I checked, and sure enough, the people who were running the benefit had this elaborate idea of, they weren't going to do it as a dinner, they were going to write a book musical utilizing my songs with different people singing it. So I immediately called Burt Shevelove, who lives in London, and asked him as a favor, because he's done benefits before, to take this one over.
Steve is an old and dear friend, and called me in London and said, I'm going to ask you the first important favor I've ever asked of you. Happened to have been the 12th.
After all, people are giving their time to a benefit, but they're not under contract. You can't have 6 weeks rehearsal and a 4-week out-of-town tryout. You get very little rehearsal, and you have exactly 1 day. The benefit is put together the afternoon of the evening, because some people don't even arrive in town until that day.
Stephen was blindsided. Not only did we have to tell him about the Shubert Theatre, the recording contract, the PR agency, but also the fact that Craig was writing a murder mystery musical with a complete and complex script. The gods of the theater must have intervened, and to this day I don't know why he agreed to move forward, but he did. The script was history. Burt Shevelove, Stephen's close friend and colleague on A Funny Thing, was brought in to direct, and he and Steve began to work very closely with us. We raided his trunk, discovered gems that are now standards, and discussed performers and the numbers they would sing. Craig was quite upset that he would not become a Broadway librettist. I tried to comfort him, but I think I was actually a bit condescending in my efforts, saying, "You really haven't done very much, Craig," etc. I don't think he ever forgave me. He had a whole chapter on the tribute in his Sondheim and Company book, without one mention of its producer. Some memories stand out. I loved rediscovering I Remember, and I made sure Victoria Mallory would sing it. As producer, I could have chosen to sing another number or two, but I chose not to because I was stressed by the producing responsibilities, and the Follies Quartet was quite enough. Carol Lawrence wanted airfares, limos, and hotels, and Steve said no, she was out. Phil Silvers wanted to come badly, but near the event he said he was just too sick a man. Ethel Merman teased us till the very end, and then went to a party in Florida. Steve told me Zero Mostel was just fucking impossible. Without consulting Steve, I chose Paul Gemignani to be our musical director because the cast was always excited and would come alive when he would take over the Follies matinees. Feathers were ruffled, and Hal Hastings, our Follies conductor, was quite upset, as was Hal Prince. I think Steve sensed that my choice was the right one because Paul then became Steve's go-to music man for years. I believe it was about this time I reached out to Jonathan Tunick, who said yes, he would be thrilled to orchestrate the evening, and Donna McKechnie to stage and choreograph the show. We asked Florence Klotz, the costumer for Follies, to help us with costumes. Jack Mann handled our sound, and Theron Musser, the award-winning lighting designer, to light our show. They happily agreed, and so our team was set, our A-team. Things began to move very quickly. When the folks at AMDA became nervous about shouldering the full responsibility for the evening, Philip Burton, the president of the school, and Richard Burton's adoptive father suggested sharing the evening with the National Hemophilia Foundation because Richard was a hemophiliac. So now we had two charities. I took a train up to Boston where A Little Night Music was about to preview to meet with Steve and discuss numbers and who would perform them. We had a long, productive lunch, and then Steve excused himself, saying he needed to work on a new number for Glynis Johns. I asked if I might sit in on his work session, to which he replied, "Thanks for asking, but I try to work alone." Never did find out which number he was writing. I always hoped it was Send in the Clowns. but it might have been written a few weeks earlier. A few weeks later, I went back to see the show. I fell in love with it and was thrilled with the show's set. I knew it would be perfect for the tribute. Of course, without the cars and the cast. Thanks, Boris Aronson. Through Donna, we made an arrangement with Ron Farella, who had a lovely dance studio near the Shubert for our rehearsals.
Angela Lansbury, you've come a long way. You've come from London for this. Why haven't you?
Well, because I wanted to pay tribute to Stephen Sondheim, because if it hadn't been for Stephen, I wouldn't be in the musical comedy business. That's fun there. Did you have some wonderful times with that?
With West
West
Side?
Side.
My
Oh,
gosh, West Side. I mean, that had a lot to do with the rest of my life.
Then I can't. If you don't, then I gotta give it to you. I don't want it. If you won't, I gotta have it. High, low, wrong, right, yes, no, black, white. God, why don't you love me? Oh, you do. I'll see you later.
Things were accelerating, and thank God Bert had the experience he had. We all arrived at the Shubert early on a rainy Sunday, March 11th. After many excited hellos, much hugging and chatting, one of my specific memories is Bert standing in the aisle, writing notes on small note cards, not only for the cast but for the accomplished presenters who would be moving the show forward. At this point, I really got why there was no murder mystery musical being performed that night. The stars and presenters were filing in on scattered schedules, some from faraway places, and had only minutes to rehearse. Watching Bert assemble and deal with the actors, musicians, and crew with the patience of Job, I understood in a profound way why Stephen would never have moved forward with this evening without his incredibly talented dear friend. He not only protected Steve, but birthed our one-of-a-kind celebration. A poster was placed on stage out of Steve's view, and word was spread for all to sign it. Rehearsals continued all afternoon with the orchestra sight reading Jonathan's work and with Donna directing traffic. We were running out of time, and I believe the overture was the last orchestration that needed a run-through, and it was nearing our 7 p.m. curtain time. When it was over, the stage was cleared, and the audience was let in. We were late, but we were ready. At 7:22 p.m. on Sunday evening, March 11th, 1973, the curtain went up on Sondheim, a musical tribute. As the overture began, my mind traveled back to the opening night of Follies, the show that really introduced me to Steve and to his work. I remember how the New York Times really didn't get the show, and how Steve had been dismissed, neglected, misunderstood for a good portion of his early career. He was yet to be recognized as the genius he was. But here I was with this incredible man, with all Broadway both on the stage and in the audience, finally giving him his deserved praise. I'm sure most of you are familiar with the LP if you are older, or the CD if you are younger. I'd like to share with you some of my favorite moments of the evening, not on the recording. How lucky we were to have the charming Jack Cassidy lead us off, setting the tone with a joke that continued through the entire evening.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. For those of you who only go to the theater, my name is Jack Cassidy. And for those of you who only watch television, this is the Shubert Theatre. But enough about me. Tonight is for and all about Steve Sondheim. I've known Steve, well, a good 18 years. He was in his early 20s. I had just turned 17 at the time. And Not very many people know that, including Steve. But at any rate, enough about me.
Next up was Sheldon Harnick.
Not long after I arrived in New York some 20-odd years ago, and I was still floundering around, my brother Jay invited me to a backers audition. He wanted me to hear the work of another unknown named Steve Sondheim. So I went to the audition, I listened, and the writing was of such a high quality, I remember thinking, if this is the way the unknowns write in New York, then I'm going back to Chicago.
Richard Rogers' telegram spoke volumes.
Mr. Rogers cannot be here tonight, but he has sent a telegram which I'd like to read. I have nothing but the greatest enthusiasm and admiration for Stephen Sondheim's lyrics. He is merely brilliant. Signed, Richard Rogers.
Julie Stein brought us back to the evening's humorous theme.
Thank you. Enough about myself. When I met Steve to write Gypsy, we were total strangers. I hardly knew him. He wanted to do both himself, you see. But then and I was so happy that he had agreed to collaborate. And being total strangers, we sat in a room and looked at each other for about 3 minutes. I went to the piano and hit something. And I must say, wonderful things started to happen because in about 5 minutes, everything was coming up roses. I love you, Steve. I really hate you. You're so young.
Lenny Bernstein joined in, and after very few choice words, accompanied Larry Kurt, who soared in his wonderful opening song from West Side Story.
For those of you who, for those of you who go only to the Shubert Theatre, oh well. Enough about us.
Could be, who knows? There's something due any day. I will know right away, soon as it shows. It'd make him cannonballing down through the sky, gleaming its eye bright as a rose. Who knows? It's only just out of reach, down the block on a beach, under a tree. I got a feeling there's a miracle too, gonna come true, coming to me. Could it be? Yes, it could. Something's coming, something good. If I can wait, something's coming. I don't know what it is, but it is gonna be great. With a click, with a shock, phone will jingle, door will knock. Open the latch. Something's coming, don't know when, but it's soon. Catch the moon, one-handed catch. Around the corner, or whistling down the river. Come on, deliver to me. Will it be? Yes, it will. Maybe just by holding still, it'll be there. Come on, something, come on in. Don't be shy, meet a guy, pull up a chair. The air is humming, and something great is coming. Who knows? It's only just out of reach, down the block on a beach. Maybe tonight, maybe tonight, maybe tonight.
As if that weren't pleasure enough, I now have the added pleasure of introducing Goddard Lieberson, who is always introduced as the man who has done most to preserve and perpetuate the music of shows. He is also, of course that's only fractional, he is also the man who invented perpetuating the music of shows, and the man who has done so many other things that one could spend far too much time listing them. I think it's probably more condign to say that he is the man without whom Goddard Lieberson.
Thank you very much. Every word was true. And that's not enough about me, but we haven't time. At great personal sacrifice, I determined not to say anything witty tonight. And this little card handed to me by my old friend Bert Shevloff is going to do a great deal contributing to following through on that resolve, I think.
Hal Prince was very brief.
You know, it's sheer hell to cut good numbers from shows, and we do it all the time for reasons of length or character or the structure of the show or whatever.
Our director introduced forum cutouts.
First show for which Steve wrote the score on Broadway is a funny thing. And 10 years later, we heard of it again. We would have never written it without Steve's encouragement and enthusiasm. He wrote many songs for the show. I remember them all. And it's very difficult for me tonight to pick the two that were cut out of the show. Some evening, perhaps, some worthy charity will just do cutouts from Forum.
George Firth spoke of company cutouts, including the one that Len Cariou sang, which is the first time folks heard "Marry Me a Little."
Company began when I brought 7 one-act plays on marriage to Stephen, and he agreed to do it, and he wrote so much music that there really was no room for the plays. So some of those songs had to be taken out of the show, and they were beautiful. And tonight, Len Cariou is going to sing a song called "Marry Me a Little," which was inspired in the show by a line that I had written of Bobby's when he was with Amy in the kitchen, and he said, "Amy, marry me, and everybody will leave us alone." And in this song, he's walking to Amy's place, and he's going to tell her this because he thinks she will understand this thought.
Marry me a little, love me just enough, cry but not too often, play but not too rough, keep a tender distance so we'll both be free, that's the way it ought to be. I'm ready, marry me a little, do it with a will, make a few demands I'm able to fulfill. Want me more than others, not exclusively, that's the way it ought to be. I'm ready now. You can be my best friend, I will be your right arm. We'll go through a fight or two, no harm, no harm. We'll look not too deep, we'll go not too far. We won't have to give up a thing, we'll stay who we are. Right, okay then. I'm ready, just enough. Warm and sweet and easy, just the simple stuff. Keep a tender distance so we'll both be free. That's the way it ought to be. I'm ready, marry me, a little body, heart and soul. Passionate as hell, but always in control. Want me first and foremost, keep me company. That's the way it ought to be. I'm ready now. Oh, how gently we'll talk. Oh, how softly we'll tread. All the stings, the ugly things we'll keep unsaid. We'll build a cocoon of love and respect. You promise whatever you like, I'll never collect. Right. Okay then. I'm ready now, Amy. I'm ready.
For Angela, the applause was deafening, and her nod to Stephen, Angela gracious.
Diamonds, what are they? Nothing compared to applause. Wow. We put these back on again. You know, Stephen Sondheim, bless his dear heart, is the person responsible for getting me into the musical theater. If it hadn't been for him and Arthur Lawrence back in 1963, I don't think I ever would have made the big step.
Jack Cassidy returned and remembered Saturday night, Steve's first show, and sings another song not on the album.
The bridge is my rainbow, the bridge is my friend, and it's got a pot of gold at the other end. Not a pot of gold you can buy or sell. It's the Plaza Hotel. I'm crossing the rainbow, I'm taking a ride to a razzle-dazzle world on the other side. Very special world, gotta have a pass called class. A man can be a runner by day, but socially what counts is the way he looks. And that's what I mean by class. I've got 2 suits, just 2 to my name. I've got just 2 suits, but both of them came from Brooks. And that's what I mean by class. Class is when you're wrapped in Harris tweed and always look impeccable in what you're wrapped in. Class is when you demonstrate your breeding, like for instance when you call a waiter captain. This is why a room is a flat. You don't say tie, you call it cravat. Say you drink from a tumbler instead of a glass. That's the mark of someone who has what I call class. The beautiful people who live out there have savoir-faire, that's class in French. The beautiful people who live with grace on Sutton Place, wear robes and peignoirs and purchase Renoirs. The beautiful people are my people, it's them I belong with. Now tell me what's wrong with that. I'd like to own a Rolls Royce, a Braca Dufi, or things expensive and choice and rare. I've got the friends that I need to share them with me, but I need the things to share. Some people live out their lives and don't give a damn. They buy things on the installment plan. That's not for me. I don't wanna be what I am. I wanna be what I can. Beautiful people get up at noon and spend all their time having fun. They better make way, 'cause very soon the 400 will be 401. $10 ticks, Havana cigars, cross-country trips in high-powered cars. Captain, bring me a brandy and a large demi-tasse. Weeknights, I'm a Brooklyn boy, but on Saturday night, I got class.
And then there was Hermione Gingold. Hermione's liaisons and Glynis's Send in the Clowns were not included because the Little Night Music being recorded simultaneously created a rights issue.
I don't think being introduced as a beautiful girl is any more extraordinary than the fact that I play an 80-year-old woman in a Little Night Music. Takes me 5 hours to put on the makeup. I sit there looking at my face covered with cement, and I say to myself, if it goes on much longer, you won't have to put on any makeup at all.
One of the ladies who could not be with us tonight because she has a shooting schedule in the morning in England is Lee Remick, and she wanted to come, and she was going to sing a favorite of mine, so I'll try to get through it instead. Anyone can whistle, that's what they say, easy. Anyone can whistle any old day, easy. It's all so simple. Relax, let go, let fly. So someone tell me why can't I? I can dance a tango, I can read Greek, easy. I can slay a dragon any old week, easy. What's hard is simple, what's natural comes hard. Maybe you could show me how to let go, lower my guard, learn to be free. Maybe if you whistle, whistle for me.
This was my opening and closing night note from Steve. Kurt, now that the last 3 months have aged you so, you'll never have to play another juvenile again. Fondly, Steve. He was right. Finally, the most memorable comment on the evening to me was Steve's. Recently, before he passed, when he was asked about all the tributes and galas over the years, Stephen said, "Tribute-wise, in answer to your question, the Shubert one was the first public appreciation by my peers and by people who perform my songs. As with all virgins, the first is the most memorable."